So Jim, good morning.
Good morning.
I am here in New York just to look at your experience because you had something so huge here. And I think it's very important to draw lessons for every leader in the world who could be confronted to this sort of thing. So perhaps the first question, who you are, what did you do, how you train these people, because you were exactly in the problem in New York.
Okay, my name is James Ellson. People call me Jim, and I spent 40 years in government service in New York City. I spent most of those 40 years in the New York City Fire Department, and I retired recently as the executive officer of the Special Operations Command, which takes in all the all the special forces within the New York City Fire Department. But I was also, for the past 5 years, I was the Deputy Commissioner of the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. And in that capacity, I wrote scenarios, I wrote plans, I was one of the authors of the chemical terrorism plan in New York City and other plans. We have a heat plan, we have all these plans that have to do with basically about with mass evacuation, a mass catastrophe, such as airplane crashes, and different scenarios along along those lines.
Could we see specifically, for the first question, what were the big challenges? The challenges out of the box, something very new, something a paradigm shift. What happened which was completely outside?
The biggest thing that grasped me that day was the magnitude of the event that was going on at that time. We had the collapse of the buildings. We had these tremendous fires in the high-rise buildings that were out of control. There was no water. There were many people dead. We didn't know that we knew it was in the thousands. We didn't know if it was 10,000 or 15,000. There was the thoughts that were going through your mind as of all the people that you might have known. But one of the big issues that we had and I had to address was all the people that showed up to help, all the volunteers, all the people that came in, and when they arrived on the scene with no plan and no direction, it was like ants on an anthill. Everything was out of control. There was no leadership. There was nobody in control. So after a few days with this going on, and more people and more resources coming in, with nobody really taking charge and saying stop and halt, I was asked to, what did you do in Oklahoma City? What did you do in Oklahoma City? And what we did in Oklahoma City is we had to build a fence. Believe it or not, we built a fence, and so that's what they did. We built a fence around the site in Lower Manhattan, and at least that allowed us to, when we built this here fence, and we put security with police officers at the entry points, we at least had some control of the people who were going in. Then what we had to do, we had to make it a manageable operation. It was large, very large. So we had to break it up into segments. We broke it up into four different segments. We had to bring together all the people from government and from the private sector. We had to sit down. We had to talk about what happened and what are we going to do now and where we're going to go. So once we got that in control, once we started to pull back some of the people that weren't needed there, we got sort of a handle, some type of a handle on the rescue and recovery operations. We had to come up with a list of the people who were missing. So the cooperation of the people in the private sector, of course, was necessary then, because they knew who was in the building. We estimated at the time, we didn't know if there were 45, 50,000 people in the building. We didn't know how many people were in the building at that time. So we took the highest figure, and of course the press took that, and then the press ran with it. A lot of a lot of the problems that we have in an operation like this is misinformation that the press has. It was so important to get and appoint a public information officer. That public information officer had to be there and had to give the press the correct information on what we were doing at that time and what we were doing on the recovery.
And at the same time, you've lost many top leaders and your emergency operation center.
Yes, but we were able to from previous exercise, full-scale exercises, we were able to sit down and operate without those leaders, because what we did, we downsized and we used by a segmented. We had smaller leaders in each section at that time. We had to continue to do what needed to be done at that moment. We set up a temporary command center. It wasn't as well run as the one that was in place that we lost, but yet through previous experience over the last 5 years, and people coming in and sitting in the command center, and like with Y2K, when we brought everybody, all different people from government in and from private sector, they had an idea and they knew how private sector, how the command center worked. So we were able to put that together on an ad hoc basis, and we were able to move forward from that point on.
And I saw you were just on the 12th of September, you were going to have an exercise. How it worked?
Yeah, well, we were going to have an exercise in that building on the 12th of September, and the exercise, I don't know if it was a chemical or a biological exercise that we were going to have, but I believe it was going to be a chemical because I wasn't involved in it. Well, they were going to do a large evacuation of the building, talking about the evacuation of the building and going back to 1993, and the people who were in the building and experienced the bombing in '93 became aware of where the stairs were. The companies themselves, Merrill Lynch, they practice evacuation drills. They had evacuation drills in the building. In my classes, I always used the World Trade Center as a model of an evacuation. I used it as a model of having a fire command station within the building. It was always a model building. None of us on that day expected that building to come down. None of us ever expected that building to come down. It was a large fire, and a couple of previous fires that we've had here in the United States of buildings that have burned for, some buildings have burned as long as 19 hours, such as in Philadelphia and other buildings in Los Angeles, but we expected the fires eventually to burn out. We knew that we had a lot of people that had died in a crash. We were aware of that, but we never once expected that.
But this was completely new.
It was completely new. Looking back at the building and research that's been going on now, the plane hit the building. The building stood up when the plane hit it, but the ensuing fire is what caused the building to come down. It did a lot of damage to all the steel and steel work that was in that building.
So some of these very strange things, you lose the EOC, you lose some top leaders, enormous convergence, some unbelievable, the fact that the building finally has fallen.
Well,
these are the key.
Another suggestion that I had was I said that we're going to have to set up we had to set up the incident command system, which we follow in the United States here. So we set up the incident command system, but I realized and looking at reading your book and other material that I read, I says that we have to take the incident command system and take it away from the site, visible from the site, so we can't smell the smoke, so we can't see what's going on. Because by doing that, it distorts our thinking. So what we did, we set up an incident command system in a firehouse that was approximately half a mile away from the area and totally obscured to the scene. And in that building, we set up the incident command, and we brought all the agencies together, and we had a meeting at 7 a.m. in the morning, and we had another meeting at 7 p.m. at nighttime. And what we did there, we all the agencies came together, and one person led the meeting, and we talked about what we were doing, all the issues that were going on. We made a plan of what we're going to do in the next 24 hours, what we're going to do in the next 72 hours. We also looked at some of the problems that we had in the previous 24 hours. We looked at safety. We looked at the issues of the environment with the smoke. But little by little over the days, it got very, very tight, and more of the people came in, and we were able to go. We were able to go from there, and we made good decisions. We made good decisions. We finally started to get people off the pile, where we could bring in heavy machinery to actually go in there and start picking at the steel, what we call picking at the steel. And of course, over the course of the next 9 months, we were able to remove everything from that site.
But during that day, you were advisor or in charge?
I was an advisor.
Advisor.
I was an
And this
advisor. I had just recently.
essential.
I had just recently retired, and what happened, I was the executive officer of the Special Operations Command, and I also had this experience as being a deputy commissioner, and I had this background from the '93 bombing of the World Trade Center. I was also at the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, TWA air crash over Long Island. I was there, and I've had this and a number of other smaller scale events, disasters that we've had in New York City. So I was aware of how to manage a site, but I also worked with this very, very strong leader, who was Deputy Chief Raymond Downing, and he was killed along with the Chief of Department Peter Gansey and Commissioner William Feehan. And these were strong leaders, men that knew what they were doing, men, like you say, who stepped out of the box. But they were killed that day, and they had asked me to come in and advise them on whatever area that I could do to help them. They knew my background from teaching at the different universities, and so I was, they knew I was aware of disasters. So they were grasping out and trying to bring in anybody who can help them. But they had a level of trust in me, more so.
And you had this capacity to step back a little and to have a clear view of everything, because when you are directly in charge, it's much difficult to step back a little, and this is a very important position to have.
Well, one of the things that I talked about, Patrick, was that the leader, the person who's going to be in charge, can't be overwhelmed with information, and the information that this person get is good information, and it's contained information. Every little event that's going on, he doesn't need to hear. All that information needs to be filtered out. So that leader, that person in charge, has to step back and be able to rely on his staff to feed him the important information. We know that how important information is, but you weed out the good information and the bad information. He has to get all the good information.
And now, so if you had to summarize all that for another mayor in London, in Paris, in Frankfurt, if you had to give him 2 or 3 key things to have in mind if he's confronted to this sort of thing, could you?
The big thing is just be prepared. We have to be prepared for the unexpected. We have to think. We have to think clearly outside the box. We have to have these here plans in place. We have to have the proper people in place. We have to have the proper resources. You can't have a catastrophic event and then look for resources. You have to have those resources in place. You need to know who your people are. You need the leaders, the mayors. They have to get personally involved in it. They have to be brought in at the table exercises. They have to sit down. And when we would go through, we did this in New York City. We would, the mayor, his council would come in, and we had these exercises that, for an example, a chemical terrorism exercise where we looked at thousands of people dying and thousands of people going to hospitals and the hospitals being overwhelmed. How would you react? What do you tell your people? So the mayor, his staff, and all the other people have been there before. They've picked up the phone. They've actually done a full-scale exercise.
Yes, I heard in July, just before the event.
Yes.
Mayor Giuliani came himself to play in an exercise.
Yes. See, Mayor Giuliani, he enjoyed playing. He enjoyed it. He give me more, give me more. But is this real? Can this happen? Yes, this can happen. This can happen, and you would have to explain to him, such as what happened in Tokyo with the sarin gas attack. As large as it could be. Could it happen in New York City? Definitely could happen in New York City. Okay, let's go with it. Let's do it. Let's look at the worst possible scenario. Let's look at it. Let's bring in all the people who are going to be involved.
And perhaps the reason it was so praised outside, I don't know here, but abroad it was clear.
Yeah.
Giuliani played a major role in that. Perhaps it's himself naturally, but the fact he accepted to go personally in planning and exercise before the event.
Yes, that's true, because he took a personal interest in all the planning that we did. He took a personal interest in when we told him that we needed hundreds of level 8 chemical protection suits for the first responders, and he was there. He wanted to feel it. He wanted to touch it. He wanted to see what it looked like, how they would feel inside. He wanted to know everything about it. He wanted to know what happens, and then even with detectors and mask and any type of equipment. But he was always there. He was always attuned. Because he didn't want something of that magnitude to happen here in New York City. I mean, we set scenarios up with even on the Staten Island ferry. A release of a chemical agent on the Staten Island ferry with 8,000 passengers out there in the middle of the water. What happens? What do you do? Where do you take them? How do you get help to them? So we weren't afraid to step outside the box. But the other thing is to have the people like a Mayor Giuliani to believe in this, and he
Yes.
believed in this.
Mm-hmm.
He believed in this, and he trusted us, and he took a lot of of shots from outside people. Why are you spending $20 million for this here Office of Emergency Management? What is this, to make you look good? I mean, even though the office was blown up during the events of 9/11. What wasn't blown up, what we all retain from the exercises and the planning, we all retain that information. And like Chief Ray Downing said, it was the computer under the helmet that we had. We were able to use it on that day. We were able to use it. We knew exactly what we had to do. And Mayor Giuliani knew that, and Mayor Giuliani knew that he couldn't be on that site. He had to get off that site. He had to be away from it to make those command decisions, just like the fire department did when we set up a command post in that firehouse.
And specifically, you underline time after time the importance of the leader.
Yes.
The tendency is to think that the leaders just have to check they have specialists to take charge, plans and checklists and so on. But in your mind, a leader is something much more important.
Everybody looks towards the leader for answers. The general public themselves, the people who are out there who are saying, what is going on? Please tell us what was going on. He was so well versed, he could go out and meet the press a couple of times a day and tell the public what was going on and how they were moving ahead, and he kept the public informed. It was so important that the public be informed, because what he did, he he prevented mass confusion among the people. I mean, New York City was locked down that day. Nobody came in or out of New York City that day. Nobody, except the emergency workers. I mean, there was a tremendous amount of fear. Is something else going to happen? And through his leadership and his advisors and his prior planning and his knowledge of disasters and his experience with good people, he was able to be comfortable as much as he could in that situation and project that comfortability and say, we're going to be okay, we're going to be okay.
So this was a way to ensure confidence, trust, and not the contrary. Because if your leader is not prepared,
No.
then you can
Yes,
have...
yes. And if you don't have a strong leader, we're not going to trust that person. We're going to feel betrayed. Be betrayed by government, and there's so many people out there who are looking for that little edge to get in there where government betrayed them. And in this event, government did not betray anybody. The principles in general were there. The principles in general that you and I both know are there. These were people who thought outside the box. These are the people who took the risk. They put their professional careers and agenda aside, and they took the risk. And in a moment of disaster and calamity, they stepped forward and they led a nation. They led the city, and the governor led the nation, the state, and the president led the nation. And